Let's see if... I'm going to do a little retweeting here and a little retweeting there. Just check what's connected. And get this out of the way here. And get this back to right there. All right. Okay. I think this means we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, tech fans of all shapes and sizes and sorts, welcome to another SGGQA podcast, the weekly podcast where I, the SGG, the SomeGadgetGuy, answer questions and answers in real time and get all of this set up so that we can talk about some news stories that I think might have slipped through the cracks in the last week. I'm getting some reports that apparently there's some issues with the YouTubes. Maybe we will just run Periscope only. Hold on, guys. Let me see if I can get in and check this out. We'll diagnose this live. We're doing it live. Now, I'm seeing people on YouTube. I'm seeing Aditya Anil, Fat Produce, Viper. Viper's watching us on the Periscopes. What's up, buddy boy? All right. So if I'm seeing some other reports on trouble or what's going on, you have to elaborate more because you understand I'm running a live podcast right now, and then trying to troubleshoot means it's not working is like the least helpful thing you can do to someone, trying to keep all their thoughts and talk and host a show all at the same time. Aussie Beach Bum, Nitpicker, James Vincent, Adrian, TA, Sherrill, Viper. Oh, Viper, issue with the YouTubes, such a surprise, LOL. Yeah, at this point, I don't even know anymore. And I'm seeing the the Silver Ace on Twitch. All right, we got a full house today. This is excellent. And I'm going to try not to keep my biology funneled directly into this microphone. Okay, one more time. Let's kick this off for reals. We are live. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, tech fans of all shapes and sorts and persuasions. Welcome to another Monday morning tech chat show on the SGGQA podcast channel. I am SomeGadgetGuy, Juan Bagnell, the SGG, and the QA is our way of having a question and answer session, sort of a weekly live discussion of news stories that I think are important to talk about, especially some news stories that might have fallen through the cracks. Why we do the show on a Monday instead of trying to wait till all of the news hits on Friday and trying to make sense of it all and chewing it all up. From the Silver Ace, are you still dying after CES? So I tempted fate too hard. I was super proud of me. I made it out of CES without getting crazy CES flu. I got home, started working out hard, New Year's resolutions, everything was going to be great, and then I picked up a head cold, either from my wife or my daughter, and that sort of laid me out for a couple days. So I'm getting back on track. My voice is doing better, but I'm still a little congested, and I feel like that's a common theme on this podcast is talking about voice health. It's like I do a lot of talking and a lot of podcasting and a lot of video shoots, so you get to hear all stages of one's voice, the spectrum of one's voice health. But I feel like I'm in better shape now. I feel like I'm ready to tackle some things. I feel like I'm ready to dig into some stuff. Got some videos done end of last week and over the weekend, so I'm feeling pretty good. From Bargov Pa, your videos on audio codecs were awesome. I'm so glad people are enjoying those kinds of videos because I was looking around trying to find some analysis on, like audio quality and Bluetooth and stuff, and it really wasn't there. So I'm trying to figure out ways that I can help that conversation so you guys know what's actually going on with your audio. From TA, a new pickles mug. No. Oh, no. This is an old coffee mug. I have the obviously the best tasting coffee mug available on the internet is this one that's covered in pickles right here. Oh, and my video is flipped again. That's so weird. Okay, so for OBS, I try and how do I get that back? I don't know. We're gonna run it backwards. I don't want to try and troubleshoot something else live. Hold on. Wait. Hold on. Transform, flip, horizontal. Do it. Oh wait, no, that's the wrong one. Hold on. I just flipped my website, my screen capture horizontal, so that's probably bad. And flip horizontal. Hey, now it's all correct. Let me just recenter this here. Get that right there. All right, good enough. From Aditya, no, we need more merch. I am not the best graphic designer, so I'll have to work on other things that I can do for a future Gadget Guy merch store. James Davis, do you recommend in-ear multi-driver headphones or over-ear headphones? I recommend having a variety of audio listening solutions. This is another major part of the conversations that we're going to be having in 2019. I am becoming even more of a frustrated zealot for hearing health. So, James, that's a phenomenal question, but I really think people should have a couple different solutions. Like, you probably own more than one pair of shoes, right? You need to have your dress shoes headphones. You need to have your, your trainers or your cross trainers or your running shoes headphones. You should probably also have your comfy loafers headphones. I look at that in the same way as you have different expectations for listening quality and also listening attention. So if you're just soundtracking other activities, some sport earbuds, fine. If you're on a super long flight and you want something comfy and something that's just sort of pillows around your ears, you should probably be using something different than what you use when you work out in the gym. So that's just kind of the general spiel that I have is I'm not a big fan in any avenue from any type of consumer electronics, from any types of gadgets. I usually don't like a one-size-fits-all solution because I feel it's too compromised for specific types of usage and specific types of endeavor. From Aditya Anil, OBS magic. Wow. I don't know why it keeps getting flipped. I really don't. I don't get it. I am not OBS skilled enough to know what's going on. And from Sarah, I've tried a variety of earbuds from earpod-like designs to comply foam to gel and everything in between, but nothing that I could use for longer than 45 minutes without pain. Any suggestions? So the major component of that is going to be budget. Obviously, I am a huge fan, if I can get the cables unkinked, I am a huge fan of going high end. So these are my custom molded Mi Audio M6 Pros, where I went and had an optical scanner jammed into my ear so that they could map my ear cavity and then all of the outer ear surfaces for this to be a great lock and a great fit. This altogether is around $250. If you're looking at something, excuse me, if you're looking at something kind of sporty and you can't use anything that enters into the ear canal, there are a couple other solutions like my wife was using for a while where they sort of clip in their pads, but they're not sealed. So you just have to be very diligent. You have to be very careful about setting your volume limits and making sure that you don't have the best listening experience, but it's about soundtracking that activity and that you're taking regular breaks so that you don't acclimate to turning up the volume to block out noise. In fact, what I would say is if you have to use something where it just sort of rests on the ear, some sort of pad of a headphone, then you just get used to the fact that you're going to have noise in the listening. Either that or going to, do I have them up here? I don't know that I have them up here. Oh, I think they're in the bucket behind me. That are going to bone conduction. And again, it's not going to block out any of the noise around you, but bone conduction leaves your ears totally open, and that would be another way for you to have situational awareness and still have music that's going on and that you can check stuff out. So from Atheus, an ear scanner, a simple mold paste wasn't sufficient. So the last time I had my ears molded was a little bit more than 10 years ago. I did not like the experience of having stuff jammed into my ears to make a mold for my last set of custom monitors. If you check out my video on the Me Audio, MEE Audio M6 Pros, I have 2 videos. The first is just the headphones themselves, and the second was the experience of having this new scan done. And it's actually an optical dental scanner, and it is so much less invasive. It creates so much less pressure around the ear, and it was a lot faster. So, I mean, they just kind of put this wand in there and they just sort of wiggle it around until they get a fully 3D rendered view of the ear, and then that's fed immediately into a 3D printer, and then that creates a mold, and then a week later, I had custom molds ready to go. So if you have the opportunity to get your ear scanned like that, I am a big fan of that kind of audio solution. But ooh, that was a good one. That was super gross. All right. Sharil Abdul Rahman. Also, Juan Bagnell has a tech bucket. We all should have one. Yes, that is my Avengers Age of Ultron premiere. That was a midnight showing. And I just keep all of my... Actually, right now, that's full of audio dongles and USB adapters. And, I mean, it's full. It's like full. It's pretty crazy. We got a bunch of questions coming in. Why did I not review a Poco phone? Last year was a pretty crazy transition year for me, leaving Pocket Now, getting in to the workflow of Newegg, and a few of those phones sort of slipped through the cracks. In fact, I'm only just now catching back up and getting to visit phones like the Razr 2 before we hit this onslaught of MWC coverage. So this year I'm hoping to spend more time talking about how to get more out of your gadget, as opposed to just, here's another phone review, and here are the megapixels on the camera, and here are the giggle flips on the processor, and here's its Geekbench score. I'm really not interested in making more videos like that. And I really want to focus on the manufacturer made a claim, and let's analyze the claim and see, does this live up to what the manufacturer claimed? So the Razr phone is going to be a fun test of that. It's a phone for gamers, right? That's the big pitch. And I'm really not impressed with videos that are like, well, let's use the gaming phone from a non-gamer's perspective. Because that to me is like saying, let's use the Pixel, but let's not update the software through Google or ever use night sight on the Pixel camera. You know, like why hamstring the device and not use it in the way that it's really good to be used? That was terrible English. All right. That was a good segue, though. Let's jump into some news. We've got a bunch of news stories to cover today. And immediately kicking this off, I had a number of people tweeting me about this. And it's the recent price cuts on the Pixel 3 and the Pixel 3 XL. I'm going straight to the Google website here. You can now grab the smaller Pixel 3 starting at $649 and the Pixel 3 XL... Oh, do I not have that page up? I don't have that page up. But basically, we're looking at like $150 price cuts for Google's top phones. The thing that I thought was kind of interesting is if you get a Pixel 3, you can also get the Pixel Buds for 50% off. Excuse me. 50% off Pixel Buds. Even at 50% off, I'm not sure that that's a very good buy. I am not a big fan of the Pixel Buds. But if you need all of your stuff to match, not only can you save $150 off of your phone, but then, you know, terrible earbuds that will contribute to hearing loss can also be yours. I'm gonna start this off here with a question for all of you in the live chat at the moment. $150 off the Pixel 3. The Pixel 3 has had a number of crazy flash sales. There was the Black Friday sale. There's all the different financing options. Are we seeing Google really moving the needle on being a first-party smartphone manufacturer? I really felt like this was supposed to be the year where we saw the Pixel break out more. My hypothesis has always been it takes about 3 years for a company to build traction, to build momentum in a market, and I just don't feel that the Pixel 3 has pushed that barrier, right? That the idea of a Google iPhone doesn't seem to be breaking through, doesn't seem to be resonating in the same way that by the time we got to like the Surface 3, you know, from Microsoft, and when we saw a Surface Pro 3 and into the Surface Pro 4, that consumers were much more aware and much more interested in what that did for things like laptops and tablets. I find the Pixel is not pushing that boundary for Google. And at a time where smartphones are plateauing, I think we've reached peak smartphone. You know, the people that are interested in buying a premium handset, that's a market that's pretty well served. Is Google really doing enough to drive home the idea of Google and Android working together on a hardware and software platform? Oh, and Bored at Work is in. Hey, what's up, buddy? Anna buying Etta. Nice. I'm hoping your I won't buy it is in relation to the Pixel Buds, because I think the Pixel Buds are terrible. From Sarah. Honestly, I snagged my Pixel 3. The live chat's going way too fast. My Pixel 3 at Black Friday for that price, and that's the only way I could recommend buying it. I think the launch price was emblematic of a problem many consumers have with how expensive our phones have been getting. Fat Produce, I really do wonder how many Pixel devices are actually being sold this generation. I would love to see those numbers. James P, nope. OnePlus, no competition. I think James P is saying that you wouldn't get a Pixel 3 because the OnePlus exists, and then that would be better competition. From Sneed Mobile, this was another thing that I don't actually have a story. You know, there wasn't a specific link this week, but a lot of people talking about we're running into February. February gets us into MWC territory, and that's when all of the new phone announcements come out. From Sneed Mobile, Pixel 3 Lite coming soon. I wouldn't go Pixel 3 or XL if you're looking for more value. I'll be really curious that maybe Google's strategy is to start splitting up their year. Maybe they're trying to play a Samsung or an LG where there's a first of the year announcement for a phone and then an end of the year announcement for a phone. So your major flagship phones fight the iPhone at the end of the year, and then they'll have a light version which comes out the beginning of the following year. That could be an interesting strategy. It depends on what actually goes into that device and whether they can meet a certain price threshold for the kind of technology that we see in there. I don't know that Google has really made the argument well that their software is enough to make up the price differences on what their hardware. Because the Pixel 3 hardware just doesn't do it for me. I'm definitely more a hardware guy than a software guy. So, yeah. From Atheus, the Google iPhone hasn't had the quality of an iPhone. That it sells at all is a miracle with all the issues it has faced due to cut corners. I keep looking at the Pixel. I don't disagree. You phrased that probably just a little bit more brutally than I would have. But like I said, the Pixel 3 hardware has never really inspired me. And it feels like all we did was put a shinier coat of paint on a Nexus and then jacked the price up. Like, to me, it feels cynical. And I don't like that feeling going in to hold a phone. And I'm not overly impressed with, like, oh, it's the best camera. Well, it's really not. If you can put that APK on any other phone and suddenly have pretty much the same camera experience, then that's not really special. It's one of the big problems I've had. I wrote an editorial on patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy talking about my experiences using the Razr. And I will be doing a full camera review now that the rains have finally kind of cleared up here in Southern California. I can get some good shots again. That I think I need to start grading smartphone cameras on a curve, because you're talking about an enthusiast phone with the Razr, and then we're expecting consumers to not be able to figure out how to install an extra camera app. And that to me seems woefully regressive. Like, the whole point of an enthusiast platform and an enthusiast phone should be enthusiasts are pretty smart, and general consumers are actually pretty tech savvy these days. So if the stock camera app on the Razr is garbage, which it is garbage, but the cameras are great if you throw on some other software, then I don't see what the problem is. Why are we saying that this is a garbage camera? So anyway, moving right along. Maybe potentially in happier news, I've got a pair of stories here that I'm looking forward to. We've got this one from Ars Technica. Google buys $40 million worth of smartwatch tech from the Fossil Group. This is from the beginning of the article from Valentina Palladino. Wearables have brought Google and the fashion-focused Fossil Group closer together. Today, Fossil announced it will sell intellectual property related to smartwatch technology to Google in a deal worth $40 million. Upon news of the deal, Fossil Group shares jumped about 8% today. And this is a move that feels a lot like the relationship that Google had with HTC. Not necessarily buying out personnel, but trading information back and forth, trading technologies back and forth. A little like also Google and Motorola before Google bought Motorola, gutted Motorola, and then sold what was left off to Lenovo. So this is something where I've been very frustrated with Google's half-hearted attempts at making an ecosystem. Is Wear OS is the perfect moniker. It's the perfect label. It's the perfect name to talk about an operating system that you wear. But all it's been used for is sort of a middling generation of smartwatches that live on your wrist, software that's gotten more complicated. I can't say I was particularly impressed using some of the newer Qualcomm SoCs for mobile. Like, lower power modes are cool, but I still have the exact same stutter and skips and lagginess and unresponsiveness that I've had on my Huawei watch. You know, like, it's newer hardware and it's technically more powerful, but this hasn't gotten any smoother from generation to generation. So that could be really interesting. I want to know what Fossil was working on. As Fossil is sort of, it's this amazing broad owner of all of these individual different brands. So like Fossil Group owns Skagen and a bunch of other companies that make watches. So I just weren't, like, what is a watch company's R&D? You know, like, what is Fossil Group's Skunk Works? What are they working on that Google didn't have that they're going to then sell? And not for, I mean, $40 million is a lot of money, but that's not like, that isn't like market defining money, right? That's not like, you know, $10 billion, you know, what a valuation for a really hot social network would be. So it can't be anything so grand that it would redefine our idea of what a watch could be, but it's something that Google wants and that they're willing to buy. So that to me is, or is Fossil looking at like, we're really not in to this smartwatch thing after all. Like maybe they're not seeing the returns on smart devices and they're like, yeah, we've got this cool tech, we've been working on it, you can just have it. From Aditya Anil, watching on my phone and my laptop on the same Wi-Fi, and somehow the phone is faster. Like it's a solid second ahead of, I can't help with, it's YouTube. I don't know what's going on there, Aditya. I don't know. But anyway, the reason why I think this is kind of interesting, seeing some potential there. One, I did get to spend some time with, at CES, I talked about wearing the North glasses. Reaching out to their PR, I'm desperately trying to find some way that we can do some kind of coverage because I really liked moving the smartwatch experience off of my wrist and putting it up at eye level. Like that to me is a game changer. Like that to me is really exciting. That is a wearable OS, and that moves our attention and our distraction into a whole different area that I think would be a huge consumer benefit. But you know, it's why I don't have a ton of faith in Google. I'm seeing exciting things happening from other companies that are truly upstarts, that are kind of hungry for this. So, following up on this IP deal, you know, buying out some Fossil tech, we also got another story this last week talking about Alphabet's health division getting FDA clearance to test EKG smartwatch features. So this is just a study watch. This is not consumer-facing yet. But Alphabet is the umbrella company that technically owns Google and all of Google's subsidiaries and Google and propane-related accessories. This is Verily. From an article on The Verge, Verily has received FDA 510K clearance for its Study smartwatch for an on-demand ECG feature. The Study Watch, announced in April, is not a consumer smartwatch, but instead meant as a test platform for the Google adjacent, Google related, and propane related accessories company to research how to best gather health data on a wearable. So this is an interesting move. It's Google playing catch up to the moves that we've seen from Apple. Building some of this heart monitoring tech into Apple Watches, right? This is one of those areas where I still feel like there is potential growth for wearable tech, especially smartwatch wearable tech, in building out health, building out monitoring. Again, we have to have some of those conversations about medical tech and privacy and encryption and consumer data. That gets a little twistier and it gets a little uglier when we look at some of the major security threats and holes on our devices. I mean, I think we need to start a letter writing campaign to every single major smartphone manufacturer to not include Facebook as an app by default. Things like that we have to have some tough conversations about. But there have already been some pretty glowing stories about the Apple Watch and its ability to detect, irregularities in heart rhythm and heart rate, and people going to talk about that with their doctors. I think those kinds of conversations are incredibly important and very valuable. And if we could start expanding that, we would see actual real competition for some cool health tech. I still hope that we'll see smartwatches that just take glucose monitoring, being able to read some of the sugar content of sweat as general trends. Obviously, that's not going to be as accurate as what you get if you're a diabetic and you've got to prick your fingers and get blood out and measure your actual glucose levels that way. But I think most consumers, even healthy consumers, would want to know that kind of information. That's important information to track that it's just never really been health critical to track. But enough people out there would start to see certain trends and start to say, oh, when I do this, my diet, when I eat this in my diet, that changes this, or I'm really sensitive to this, or I could maybe be making some smarter choices here in the middle of the afternoon. I always crash and I get really cranky with my coworkers. You're not you when you're hungry. So that kind of stuff I hope to see more. That's where I hope the watch can go, is to be a sort of a monitoring and sensor brain, and then getting the visual aspect of that off of our wrist and up at eye level, and then put some sensors into our shoes instead of counting steps. Step tracking by how we wiggle our arms has never made any sense to me. I would love to have that full body wearable operating system. So that's kind of what I would like. Goran Petrovic, will Android P include SAR value in information about the phone? Probably not. Again, it seems like SAR, that amount of radiation a device puts out, has never been something that people manufacturers or companies tend to broadcast. Get it? SAR, broadcast. It's a terrible, terrible pun. Excuse me. From Cheryl, health tech will never be an ROI pusher as a main focus. It's always an added side feature. Vainness is always. I mean, that would have been the trend up to this point, but then when we see how popular certain wearable platforms have become because of their health and fitness focus, a company like Garmin could get into this space and I think could do really well. Fitbit obviously has done very well in this space. I think there are these huge opportunities where you could drive it as the main ROI just because no one else has. It's kind of that weird chicken and the egg. Like, do these products not sell because people don't want them, or do they not sell because they really haven't existed in a way that makes sense? From the Silver Ace, would love to see health tech that monitors attention, could help detect things like ADHD or anxiety in adults. And I think we're seeing the first steps on that with Google and Apple both pretending to care about screen time, right? The two companies that are really working hard to make sure that you use your phones for everything are now telling us, oh, you're using your phones too much. When we start to see some of that data trickle out in anything more scientific, I think we'll start to see that bridged with things like eye tracking technologies. So, like HTC talking about Vive and eye tracking with VR and head tracking when our mobile devices or our smart glasses or smart goggles or whatever we're going to call them can also start to get a feel for how we're interacting with that data, how quickly we're changing between different apps. That information could probably help, could probably start conversations and help people determine what attention issues people might be facing. Of course, we also have to do that at a time where we're sort of training everybody to have attention problems and attention issues. So, that's the gig. A lot of people talking about giving me more work to do and other things to review and compare. So let's move on to the next news story. I don't know. I feel a little exhausted about this one because I feel like this has been a conversation that we've been having. This is a product that we've been eulogizing for a couple years now, and we just got another story about how we're going to have to put another eulogy together for Windows Phone. So this is from CNBC, but obviously a bunch of people have been covering this story. Microsoft recommends switching to iPhone or Android as it prepares to kill off Windows Phone. As it's been preparing to kill off Windows Phone, I don't know what, a year after the Lumia 950, something like that. This has been maybe one of the saddest stories to cover in my entire tech reviewing career. Sorry, guys, I'm really trying not to cough in front of the microphone. So, from the article, Microsoft is planning to end support for the Windows Phone it once championed as a potential iPhone, BlackBerry, and Galaxy killer. I love the CNBC article doesn't even bother saying Android. It's a Galaxy killer. Good job, CNBC. On Friday, the tech giant announced that anyone who still uses its Windows 10 mobile platform, once called Windows Phone, should switch over to an iPhone or Android. A change to the Windows 10 mobile support page was first spotted by Thoreau, a site that covers Microsoft. That's Paul. Microsoft said that on December 10th, 2019, it will stop sending new security updates, non-security hotfixes, free assisted support options, or technical content updates from Microsoft for free. In other words, there aren't going to be any more updates, and only a few phone models will even be supported until that final date. Press F to pay respects. I'm sort of exhausted by this. Like, Windows Phone has been a dead platform. Microsoft has abandoned it. It's been over for a while. It just, like, every single time one of these, like, and another brick is knocked out of the wall of Microsoft and Windows Phone, and the entire thing is about to come crumbling down. It's it's frustrating because we're stuck in a two-horse race right now. I don't think it's particularly exciting anymore watching iPhones and Androids meet in the middle of being kind of the same overall experience. Some subtle changes here, some problems there, and we ultimately arrive at something that the differences are fewer and finer than they've ever been in the past, and that's bad for competition. We don't really have a competitive market anymore. Right now, where we might get some kind of competition is in services, right? Where Epic, is launching their own game store to combat Steam. I've regularly purchased apps from outlets like Humble Bundle. Like I have a whole bunch of Humble Bundle Android games. That might be where we see some kind of competition, not for the operating system that drives our phone or for improving UI or for making any of that experience better, but maybe where we get our apps and games might be different, and that could be a competitive advantage for one person or another. Windows Phone was the absolute best, most elegant solution for organizing a user interface, for allowing customization, but then also keeping the whole experience streamlined enough to run on lower power hardware. It was designed with lower power hardware in mind, so it was a screamer on flagship fare. And I have zero confidence in Google right now. I just recently, where is it? I just recently put out a review on this. This is the CoolPad Illumina. This is what you can buy for $40. This is a $40 Android phone. And the specs are very similar to what we used to get on entry-level Windows phones 3 or 4 years ago. So what used to sell for around 100, 150, you can now get for $40. And that would be awesome if the software could run well on $40 hardware. Android Go is a mess. It's really an unpleasant software experience for hardware that used to run just fine on Windows Phone 8. So the hardware components have obviously gotten cheaper. You know, what you used to spend $150 on, you can get for $40 now. But the overall consumer experience over 3 years has gotten worse on that quality of hardware. And that's a shame. You know, if we had more competition, if we had a BlackBerry that was still in making their own operating system, or Windows Phone or something, we would have some company that we could count on as a disruptor to encourage improvements from Apple and from Google. Apple has no designs on making a truly entry-level phone. They just they can barely move. Not barely. I mean, they're selling billions of units, but you know, their strategy for trying to encourage, you know, mid-ranger sales is still a difficult strategy for a lot of consumers worldwide, and that leaves Google, and that means there's zero competition. If we had a Windows Phone at $100 competing against, you know, Android at $100, I guarantee you that Microsoft's operating system would be wiping the floor with Google, and that was one of the hottest sectors of growth. You know, when we were seeing double-digit market share in a number of countries throughout the world for Windows Phone, it was because you could pick up a $150 Nokia that ran super smooth. Like it was a really clean feel for such a cheap phone, and there was nothing like it on the Android side. So I guess the last thing that kind of makes me exhausted about putting out articles now, December 10th, 2019, I guarantee you we're going to be eulogizing Windows Phone yet again to actually talk about how it's properly end of life at that point. So we've got a flurry of stories out about it now. Windows Phone is dying. And at the end of the year, we're going to have another flurry of stories and retrospectives and lookbacks. And I'm just mad. I'm just mad because Microsoft had something really special there. They had some really good ideas, and their execution just kept fumbling any type of progress. They would build up some momentum, and then they would just throw a huge bucket of cold water on it. You know, the Lumia 920 to the Lumia 1520, some great progress, some amazing phones. I was actually seeing people using Lumias out and about, you know, like that was becoming something here in California. That was sort of the counterculture phone. If you didn't want an iPhone, you didn't want a Galaxy, you'd see some people rocking Lumias and talking about how great they were, especially for that 1520, because it was just such a monster phablet. And then it took like 3 years for them to put out another follow-up phone. And every single time they would wait like 2 or 3 years to put out a new flagship, they would also gut and change a whole bunch of software so that it would wreck any progress app developers were making in making apps for the platform. It was just terrible all the way around. It was just such a bummer that Microsoft just couldn't stick with a more consistent update schedule, a more consistent release schedule, and it put everyone off the platform. It was just such a shame. From Elias 2. Oh man, lots of comments coming in on this one right here. Renato Laporte, even Windows Mobile 10 ran pretty well on Snapdragon 200 series. That was a little bit twitchier, but yeah, I mean, was it the Lumia 550? Still ran way smoother. I mean, 3 years ago, crazy smoother than what Android Go can do. From Sherrill, the problem right now is that for a platform to work, apps need to be on it. Look how long Instagram took to be on Windows Mobile officially. Apps always make or break platforms. Right now, I think the problem is consumers are jaded, right? Who's going to take a risk on a new platform right now? Because Microsoft has just shown us, well, you know, we'll play around with it for a little bit, but then, you know, if it's not instantly crazy, amazingly profitable, then we're just gonna dump it. And they didn't seem to learn any of their lessons from the Surface team, where iteration updates, support, being aggressive with design, and, keeping boots on the ground to get consumers excited has a huge impact on your ability to generate market share. But again, that's two different teams at Microsoft not working together. And that was another problem too, is you had Windows Phone, but they didn't work with the Office team for good support on Office apps while we had that on iOS. They didn't work with the Xbox team to have good support for gaming on the Microsoft platform. It could have been the Xbox phone. All of these things, like such no-brainers. At the time, I was going to Nokia events, just like shaking whoever I could get my hands on to say, figure out partnerships, work with Xbox, work with Office, make it the phone that both dads and kids, would want to have. The same phone that, a business person is going to use could also be the same phone that a gamer would want to use. And they just kind of look at you like, yeah, we're working on such strategic partnerships and we're going to be competitive in the market. And you're like, even internally, you guys couldn't develop excitement for these products. How are you expecting Snapchat to care about your platform if the Xbox team doesn't care about your platform? But God, I miss Live Tiles. I miss it so much. It was just such a great UI, and it was just so smooth. And it's actually become now the main inspiration. Here, actually, let me throw it up on my Razer here, where I've kind of abandoned Android and home screens. Like, this started after my iPhone video, where I managed to get my iPhone down to one home screen, and then you use a folder to fake an app drawer. Well, now that's what I'm doing on my Android phones too. I'm not doing, like multiple crazy, I'm just going to show you all my personal stuff there. I'm not doing multiple crazy home screens. It's now just swipe down for my notifications, swipe up for my apps, and that's it. Main core services are right there. I'm not really messing around with widgets anymore. I'm not really doing any of those crazy customizations. And a part of that comes from having used Windows Phone. A part of that comes from really enjoying having Live Tiles and just a single column of important information at a glance. Hold up the phone, put it back down, get on with your day. Android doesn't do that well. Android takes a lot more work to get into a usable, focused mode like that. From David, Microsoft completely underestimated the power behind the Nokia brand in selling Windows phones. No one was buying the software. People were buying the brand. They removed the brand and sales tanked. I think that's part of it. Now, David, I think you're correct. The Nokia name generates a ton of goodwill, but there was a lot going on during that transition where Microsoft just halted. I feel like if Microsoft, because think about the Lumia 930 to the Lumia 950. Someone please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's almost 3 years between the launch announcement of the 930 to the launch announcement of the 950. Minus the amount of time it takes in between the announcement and actually selling the phone. I think from launch to launch, it's almost 3 years. I could be wrong. At a time where they were going through that transition, they were messing with labels and not putting Nokia front and center on things, changing it over to Microsoft. So already that was kind of a bummer, right? We all sort of acknowledged you're paying for Nokia, you should put the Nokia label on things. You could also put the Microsoft logo somewhere on there too, but that branding is important. But at the same time as they were trying to do a label swap, it took them almost 3 years before consumers could hold the phone. And then you went from the Lumia 930, amazing, high quality, really, really good feeling polycarb, matte finished back, metal edges, sort of a beautiful taper to the glass and the curves of the phone, and just incredible modern design, to the Lumia 950, which just felt like a plastic shell garbage phone from the Galaxy S2 days, right? the idea that that phone was priced at such a premium and they were going to sell a leather back so that it could feel nicer was just a terrible strategy all around. So, like, I don't know that it was just the label, but I think that was one part of an entire series of operational failures that just helped skewer the brand when it was already at its most vulnerable. The Lumia 930 was announced at MWC 2014, the Lumia 950 in October 2015. So closer to 2 years. So it would have been from the announcement of the 930 to selling the Lumia 950 would have been almost 2 years. Okay, so I had that wrong. Thank you, David. But still, imagine every single yearly update where every February we can count on a new Galaxy during a label swap. I still feel is one of the most cardinal sins that Microsoft performed. All right, moving right along. So, this is a story that I've promised to keep following up on. So I'm going to keep following up on it. This is talking about security and talking about biometric security and encryption and mobile devices. Potentially a step in the right direction for consumer protections and law enforcement. This is by way of Forbes, Thomas Brewster on cybersecurity. Feds can't force you to unlock your iPhone with finger or face, judge rules. From the article, a California judge has ruled that American cops can't force people to unlock a mobile phone with their face or finger. The ruling goes further to protect people's private lives from government searches than any before and is being hailed as a potentially landmark decision. Previously, U.S. judges had ruled that police were allowed to force unlock devices like Apple's iPhone with biometrics, such as fingerprints, faces, or irises. That was despite the fact feds weren't permitted to force a subject to divulge a passcode. But according to a ruling uncovered by Forbes, all logins are equal. So this order came from the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California in the denial of a search warrant for an unspecified property in Oakland. So first of all, I'm kind of proud of California. This is one of those like really sticky privacy versus security versus law enforcement issues that it seems kind of simple on its face, pun intended. But the ramifications of the protection of private property, the protection of information has gotten sort of a little bit stickier in a world where your password is a very visible and publicly identifiable part of you. The general rule leading up to this point has been law enforcement cannot compel you to divulge the information in your head. And so that information could be something like a PIN number, a PIN, or a password. But what do we do when everything you touch technically picks up a copy of your password? My feeling on fingerprints was law enforcement could not compel you to divulge which finger you used for your biometric security. I feel like that is a good faith argument to protect the fingerprint as a secret and proprietary piece of information. So, like, for example, on this Razr phone, I have 2 different digits trained to lock this phone down. So if law enforcement picks me up and they want to know what's in my phone, they've got a 2 out of 10 chance to figure it out, but they can't compel me to tell them which digits I trained. That's my secret. That's how I prevent that unauthorized access to my proprietary and secret personal information. That is so much stickier when your face is the password. And I really feel like face unlock is even one step less good, not because it's not technologically cool, not because it's not, a really awesome piece of technology, and it works really well and it's efficient. I mean, my iPhone doesn't work very well, but people seem to think they like it, so fine, I'll let them like it. But it's difficult to say, okay, we've got a suspect, we think he's involved in a crime, and we think that there's information on his phone that would point us to this crime. And the only thing you have to do is pick up his phone and hold it in front of his face, and then you'd have access to his personal information. That's a harder argument to make. It's a harder argument to say that this person is wanting to safeguard the contents of their phone when anyone who can get physical access to that phone can unlock it just by holding it up to him, But what I'm happy to hear is a judge in California is taking the steps to examine the technology landscape, see what the current trends are, and make a ruling that really is trying to benefit the most number of people, to benefit the society, even in some of the challenges that this technology presents. So that that to me is a lofty ideal. Obviously, I feel like this ruling will be challenged. I think other judges are going to rule in different ways. The general rule of, you can't compel someone to give up their password has still been a judge-to-judge, case-to-case, situation-to-situation kind of ruling. There hasn't been one top authority or Supreme Court ruling on what the boundaries are between law enforcement and the individual who owns that technology. So this is potentially a landmark case. Forbes is absolutely correct there, but I think this is going to be a debatable topic for a very long time to come, especially in so many companies doubling down and putting more infrastructure and more resources towards face scanning and face biometrics and face unlocking. I hate it. I think face unlock is dumb. So. So from what Marvin C. is saying, hopefully this spreads and it sets a precedent for other states. From Aditya Anil, so the police can, in theory, hack into your device if needed. I am unaware of the laws in the U.S. This is why we need these types of court cases, is because every case has been handled differently. And we need a standard. So if the standard is law enforcement cannot compel you to unlock your phone, then that should be a rule across the board. It should be they cannot compel you to give up a password, they cannot compel you to give up a fingerprint, and they cannot forcibly restrain you and unlock the phone with your face, right? So that to me makes sense. We can make that the rule. And then I also feel it's law enforcement's job to try and find a better battering ram, right? When you build a house, you put locks on your doors. You're not compelled to give your local law enforcement a key to your door before you've done anything wrong. But if they serve you with a warrant and you don't open your door, they have the authority to knock your door down. This is kind of something similar, where now the arms race should be law enforcement should be examining better ways to circumvent consumer protections and encryption. And we already see that with a number of companies that are selling boxes that can hack into older iPhones or can copy an image and brute force serve it passwords until the password token expires, and they copy it out again and they serve more brute force. And that leads to manufacturers building better encryption. We should keep seeing that arms race escalate. Better encryption for consumers, offering them the best possible technological security of its time, and law enforcement finding ways to get around it. That's the only future that makes sense for me. From Sean H. on the Porsche main RSU. Excuse me, sorry, that was really loud. RIP headphone users. I don't know what exactly phone you're talking about, Sean, but apparently you can use a different finger to boot into a completely different version of the phone to hide all of your stuff. I love secure folders, and I just love that kind of spy idea that like I've got hidden stuff on my phone and only I know the secret code to get into it. Oh, the Porsche Mate RS. Voice to text fail. It's okay, Sean. I haven't used any of the Porsche designed phones. I would love to spend a little time with one of them because they seem ridiculous, or they used to seem ridiculous. $1,000 phone, who would spend that much on a phone? And now they're like sort of totally normal. From the Legend E, wouldn't it really be more like half chance of getting the right finger since most people only use the index fingers, thumbs for fingerprint unlocking? No, so my example on the phone for the fingerprint sensor is law enforcement would have to know what finger you use. Like, they can't just guess. The secret information is, what finger did you use to unlock the phone? Law enforcement cannot compel you to divulge that. Since law enforcement cannot compel you to divulge that, then they shouldn't have the legal right to guess and make you try every single finger to try and unlock the phone. You're absolutely correct, because like most people are going to use a specific finger. But the thing about like Sony power button fingerprint sensors and the fingerprint sensor on the Razor, in my right hand, it's probably pretty obvious what finger I'm using to unlock that phone. But on my left hand, probably not so obvious. So if someone were really security conscious and they wanted to lock down the phone, and law enforcement can't compel you to give up which finger you scan for your fingerprint sensor, that could be one security through obscurity method that the consumer could use to train a different finger, even if it's less convenient to unlock the phone, if you were worried about that kind of privacy and security issue. Again, this is all also in part slightly tin hat foil territory. Just how seriously do you take safeguarding your information? If you take safeguarding your information serious to like a corporate or a government level, then you're not using Face Unlock. You're using a really strong 16-digit password with, multiple different special characters and capitals and numbers and all that stuff. I've worked in enough government contracts in the past to know that fingerprint biometric security just doesn't hold the same weight as a real strong password. So there you go. From Atheus, Juan Bagnell, there's a larger risk of law enforcement forcing manufacturers to add backdoors. I would really like, we'll never get a serious answer on this. I'd be curious to know, like, if the NSA reached out to Qualcomm and there were secret meetings about security, what that would have entailed, what that would have looked like. More, I think when we see, like, what law enforcement does, I think rather than saying, there's probably this grand conspiracy between all of the phone manufacturers and all of the components manufacturers and law enforcement agencies, all of the different alphabet agencies in the United States working together to make devices less secure for their own exploits, what I think is probably more likely is every single time an exploit pops up, our law enforcement agencies are likely some of the first organizations to find out about it, and then they're just not alerting manufacturers to those types of exploits because they want to run those exploits as long as they can. Again, it's kind of an Occam's razor. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying it's even unlikely that there isn't some kind of grand conspiracy of law enforcement and manufacturers working together. I just think it's more likely that they just don't help fix problems because they can exploit those problems. And then when those exploits are discovered, they move on to other exploits moving down the chain. And then even from the device, why do you even need to worry about building a specific backdoor into the device when it's pretty clear the NSA is able to monitor network traffic? So if you can just monitor the network traffic, then that's most of the problem right there. So if security agencies can get into our carriers and ISPs, it's not so precious that you need to try and hack the device. The device itself is you're just one point in the chain. As information is transferred and moved between from point to point, there are numerous opportunities to get your hands on usage and on data. For fat produce. That does it. I'm just using MediaTek powered devices. Oh, and TA, that's exactly what I saw in Punisher 2. I have not started Punisher 2 yet. I need to watch that. And DK Immortal, with quantum computing in the future, nothing will be safe, I heard. Well, you can only hope that with quantum computing, we also like see a quantum component of security, so like quantum computing will wreck the current state of encryption, but then we should also have encryption based on quantum computing. So there you go. That's the arms race, right? I have no idea. So let me move on to the next story, because this is actually a good tangent. It's almost like I planned the order of these stories, and this one we don't have to spend a lot of time on, but it would not be an SGGQA podcast without some kind of commentary on net neutrality and the FCC. And why is this webpage being wonky? Okay, there it goes. This is like literally minutes after I finished, not minutes, it was like hours, but after I finished last week's show, this was one of the stories that popped up. AgitPi refuses to brief lawmakers over phone tracking scandal, dubiously blames the shutdown. And this is from Gizmodo. Del Cameron, author of this article, from the article, saying there is no legal reason why AgitPi should rebuff an invitation to brief lawmakers during the government shutdown. The chairman of the House Energy and Commerce Committee on Monday criticized the FCC head for refusing to appear for a briefing about the ongoing controversy over Americans' real-time location data being disclosed to unauthorized third parties. In a call on Monday, Pi's staff told Democrats that he would not appear to discuss his agency's progress in tackling the issue due to the shutdown. His presence was requested last week for an emergency briefing by the committee's chair, Rep. Frank Pallone. I don't know his name. Pallone Jr., who cited a threat to law enforcement, military personnel, and domestic abuse victims, said the matter could not wait for the shutdown to be resolved. So we talked about this last week. We talked about how after net neutrality was repealed and how the FCC is kind of just let up on ISPs and cell phone carriers trafficking data, how a number of companies said, well, we're not going to keep tracking this location data and we're not going to keep selling it, except they all still did. And there was an article that I linked last week following the chain of T-Mobile licensing out data in aggregate, and then that data being resold and resold and resold until someone could basically go with a couple $100 to some shady van out in a parking lot and say, hey, here's a phone number, tell me where that phone was last seen. And within an hour, they could get that data, and then they could go in and check it out. That's a terrible state of affairs for any type of consumer privacy advocate, for any type of security advocate, and the organization in our government most able to regulate that space, most capable of protecting consumer interests, citizen interests, unfortunately is also right now being staffed by people that are shills for the telecom industry and have no real incentive to institute better policy or to protect citizen interests. So again, this regulatory capture has worked phenomenally well. And if you care about things like privacy and security, if you care about things like someone not being able to just like pay a couple $100 and go and find your exact location based off of a phone number, then there are clear differences between the different political entities out there that purport to represent the citizenry. So it's a pretty frustrating state of affairs, because now the argument is also being conflated with, well, government is the problem and government is broken, so we're going to break the government even more, and we're going to staff the government with shills for the industries that are supposed to be protected from this type of silly engagement. And then we'll blame that broken government for our inability to address the problems that we've created. it goes hand in hand and hand in hand in hand. And it would be nice if we could get back to some idea of some modicum of actual representation for these ideas that the majority of Americans support. This is a sad state of affairs. From Aditya Anil, how is the FCC able to work despite the shutdown? Doesn't it cost money to actually keep these servers and spy tech in operation condition? Bare bones staffing is understandable, but citizen tracking? So in any type of government shutdown, you have different tiers of government employees. You have sort of like mission critical employees, and then you have sort of below the line employees. So the shutdown it always sort of stages, and most of the people are going to be knocked out because they're not deemed operationally critical or mission critical for operations. But we are going to be running into some problems too, where if funding bills aren't approved, I think there are something like a dozen government websites that are also going to be shut down I want to say relatively soon. And relatively could mean like in the next month, or it could mean in the next couple months. I seriously doubt this shutdown will last multiple more months, but we are running into staffing and funding issues like you've described that are going to start wiping out additional services, additional programs, and additional benefits that people can still kind of count on, because even though the government has been shut down, there were still monies in the pipeline that are being executed by the remaining staff. That's starting to dry up, though. So again, our economy is going to take a huge hit. We're going to see some slowdowns there, and all of these programs and services are going to take a huge hit. We're going to see multiple more slowdowns there, and we still have to deal with the smuggest, most punchable face on the internet, Ajit Pai, being the figurehead for all of this, while humongous corporate interests continue to wreck public policy for minor economic gain and the benefit of their shareholders. It's pretty bad. Fat produce, it's late stage capitalism at its best. At its worst, at its most superlative. Yeah. From Samuel Ventimiglia, government agencies that are considered essential are forced to work without pay, while ones like the USDA are deemed non-essential, so they are on furlough. In addition to that, because Sam's correct, in addition to essential or non-essential, there are also different programs that utilize funding in an off-year kind of capacity. So there are types of scientific research which still might be conducted today because their budgets are approved and their staffing is approved in a way that offsets from the fiscal year that the federal government uses. And that's not really worth spending much more time on this podcast describing. Sean H. God, I hate that man. All right, so here's another frustrating thing that kind of highlights our need for a good regulatory oversight of the telecommunications space. This is an editorial from Tech Dirt, the wireless section of Tech Dirt. This is the author, Carl Bode, or Baudet, Carl Baudet. I don't know anyone's name this week. I am really like Swiss cheesing. My memory is just all over the place right now. But this is from Tech Dirt. Title of the article, AT&T execs think it's really funny that they misled consumers about 5G availability. It's a pretty short editorial. I'll have it linked in the show notes after this podcast is wrapped up. But I could read off the whole thing right here. Earlier this month, we noted how AT&T pissed off competitors and consumers alike by pretending its existing fourth-generation wireless network, 4G, was actually 5G. More specifically, AT&T has been changing the 4G icon on its customers' phones to say 5GE, despite the fact that actual 5G service at scale is probably several years away. So AT&T is doing the same thing with 5G that they did with 4G. Remember, Sprint tried to convince us that WiMAX was a good idea. Then Verizon actually launched LTE. They were first. And AT&T was sort of caught with their pants down in that kind of infrastructure and development, because why invest money in infrastructure when you could just take all of the money and give it to shareholders and turn profits, right? If you build more towers and you build new radios and you build new connection, well, that costs money, and that looks like a bad thing for your shareholders. So what they did was you had sort of 3G and different flavors of HSPA and really fast GSM style connections, and they called it 4G. It was 4G speeds. And, we lovingly nicknamed it FAUXG, 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 because they didn't really have true LTE connectivity. And now they're doing the same thing. So they're calling this 5GE, 5G evolution. So it's taking your existing LTE network as it evolves. We'll call it 5G. And it's gross, and it misrepresents what you actually get. And there's not anything we can do, because the agencies we would task with regulating this space have abdicated their responsibilities to really protecting consumers. So we're stuck with companies lying, essentially. This is like I said, this is a gross mischaracterization of what someone's actually going to pay for. It's already confusing enough for consumers, and AT&T is making it worse, not better. So from the article, hold on, let me see if I can get the quotes back up. I'm going to drink some more water, so I'll still cough in front of the mic. I apologize for that. Okay, so this is from, let me see if I can find the name, AT&T Communications CEO John Donovan decided instead to double down and expressed glee at the level of consternation AT&T's fake 5G created. Quote, "Every company is guilty of building a narrative of how you want the world to work. And I love the fact that we broke our industry's narrative 2 days ago. And so they're frustrated and they're going to do what they do." Okay. Further quoted in this exchange, let me get that right there. "I think the result of last month beating the industry out with the 5G hotspot and this 5GE launch a couple days ago, our competitors are frustrated," Donovan said. "If I have now occupied beachfront real estate in my competitors' heads, that makes me smile." What crap. I mean, seriously, that's total BS. That's like frat boy posturing, chest puffery in the worst, silliest, dumbest way possible. And Marvin C is right on the point. Class action lawsuit against AT&T. Marvin C, if that comes to pass, I feel like you deserve some legal consult fee. That's absolutely. But the main problem being, we need some kind of FCC or FTC regulatory oversight of this space, and we keep falling behind technological trends. Our politics keeps falling behind technological trends. I've got a trio of Facebook stories where government needs to get involved. We've got problems with loot boxes and gambling mechanics in video games where government is looking like it needs to get involved. We need to be putting pressure on tech sectors who play fast and loose with consumer data, not just Google's and Facebook's and Amazon's, but like credit reporting agencies have faced very little comeuppance for major and gross misuse of consumer data. And where's our FCC? Where's our FTC? That is the sole reason that these organizations exist. And right now, we can't count on them to do their job. So the problem is going to get significantly worse before it gets better. Sean H., let's get a jit pie on it. And from Marvin C., problem is most consumers are ignorant, so by the time a suit actually comes, the real 5G will be up and working. Unfortunately, that is also part of the problem too. But there are enough people who are hip to this, who are savvy, and who do understand what's going on, that the excuse that our government can't operate or can't enact change in benefit of the consumer before the consumer is educated on this is an argument that is makes me really sad that those words just came out of my mouth. So, from Richard Ratner, wasn't this done with 4G LTE 2? Yeah, that's exactly what I was describing, where it was faux G. It wasn't real 4G, but they made the same specious claims because they didn't want to actually invest in the proper infrastructure. And I think it's time that we stop rewarding companies for that type of behavior. From the Sentinel 909, this is a good point. I feel like I could do an entire video just on this. It appears to me that tech companies are following the same strategy pharmaceutical companies are. Move too fast for the law to catch up. Considering some of the recent challenges we faced in healthcare, in medical tech, and in different types of prescription drugs, and how those things can, how those companies have been able to put pressure on insurance and on the government, I would likely agree. There are some very clear analogous strategies being employed on those two fronts, and that's really sad. Yeah. Fat Brutus, I really am wondering how much 5G devices in 2019 will cost. $11 billion. All right. So we've made it to the end of my block of new segments, and here we've got a trio of Facebook shenanigans. Let me kind of see if I can compress these a little bit so that then we can wrap up with a little extra Q&A if you guys have any questions, because I got some great headphone questions at the beginning of this podcast. I'd love to interact, wrap up the show even more. So, Facebook is super evil. There, I said it. I know, right? Super controversial. This was actually a sentiment that was published by numerous blogs throughout the last week or so. This is from ctvnews.ca, a little outlet up in Canada. But like I said, numerous people pontificated on this idea. Tech writer suggests that the Facebook 10-year challenge may be collecting data for facial recognition algorithm. From the article, as innocuous as it may seem, the viral 10-year challenge flooding social media feeds everywhere may have been created to collect large amounts of data for future facial recognition software, according to one prominent tech writer. Although its inception is hard to pinpoint exactly, the so-called 10-year challenge or glow-up challenge meme appears to have started picking up steam shortly after the new year. Then let me scroll down. They have a whole bunch of tweets from people actually participating. That's how you pad out your article, is you change the font size, you change the period size, and then you link to a bunch of tweets. Tom Keenan, a professor of environmental design at the University of Calgary and a fellow of the Canadian Global Affairs Institute, said he doesn't think Facebook wouldn't really need to create this meme challenge because it already has access to timestamped photos of its users. The author of the book Technocreep said O'Neill makes a good point that the 10-year challenge could have been orchestrated by someone looking to collect data because the source of the meme remains unknown. So maybe not necessarily Facebook, but someone else could be putting pressure on this type of social media user participation, and then using that information to try and train AI to do these things. The thing that always happens in a science fiction-y sense, and this is a conversation like Andrew, Fat Produce, and I have had on numerous occasions, is we all kind of want to get to like a Star Trek technology future. But the mechanisms that operate that future feel like they would be really evil if they were just implemented by today's corporate forces, right? You want the benevolent Star Trek computer. You don't want your life lived under the thumb of Facebook. But the idea that we could be unwittingly playing into some grand design of someone creating this meme to train AI actually could have positive ramifications too. Our algorithms for aging up missing people are actually pretty good, but they would get better if we could feed them good data. Huge swaths of people from 10-year periods of change, and then those learning algorithms could better sort facial information and come up with better composites of what someone might look like years later. We would definitely be more accurate than television producers, right? Again, taking it back to Star Trek, when Captain Picard got real old in that one episode where he was living out another species, life, Patrick Stewart aged way better than the makeup team at Star Trek aged him up to look. Or even in the series finale, Patrick Stewart looks way better today than he looks like at the end of that episode where he's supposed to be super, super old and ancient. If they had this Facebook algorithm that could sort faces, maybe they would have had better designs for old Picard makeup. I don't know. Just saying. Could happen. From Sharil Rahman, the 10-year challenge, and I personally feel it has some truth that it is for face data collection thing. From Abraham Artemis, sometimes I forget that Instagram is Facebook. Ha ha ha, concerning laugh. From Fat Produce, Andrew, the technology of tomorrow can very easily be corrupted. Social change is just as important as technological change. Otherwise, we run the risk of destroying ourselves. That's deep, dude. But yes, absolutely agree. Abraham Artemis, David Bowie's comment about internet is true all along. From the Sentinel 909, someone else is training AI algorithms? Good. We need competition. Well, so I wanted to start that off with Facebook because that's as close as I could find to a reasonable Facebook story over the last 2 weeks. And mind you, that's not a good Facebook story. That's just the closest I could find for an article that Facebook was involved in that wasn't how terrible Facebook was. Because we also got another story. This is from Business Insider. Facebook employees were caught writing 5-star reviews for its Portal device on Amazon, and now they must take those reviews down. From the article, Facebook employees have been caught leaving glowing reviews on Amazon for Facebook's new video chat device. Facebook released the Portal, a video chat and smart speaker device, in October. It's the first hardware product built and sold under the Facebook brand. The new gadget has already faced some hardship as Facebook acknowledged that it could collect data about its owners to help the company target ads at people. Now, it seems Facebook employees are trying to artificially inflate the device's ratings on Amazon. The New York Times tech columnist Kevin Roose was the first to spot the stellar reviews were being left by people with the same names as Facebook employees. So this, to me, is another sort of gross misrepresentation of how a product performs. And, I think the same things need to happen. We need to have consistency for punishments, right? So when Huawei was caught trying to goose the reviews on, the Mate 10 Pro, not last year, the end of 2017, I think Best Buy was probably correct in cooling off the relationship between Best Buy and Huawei, removing Huawei phones from store shelves. I mean, it seemed kind of like a brutal response, but at the same time, we were going through all of the initial news on hacking. Huawei did not land the AT&T contract. We thought that the Mate 10 Pro was going to end up on AT&T, but same thing. Facebook is a direct competitor to Amazon in terms of these types of products and services. And if they're going to try and manipulate Amazon's already pretty easily manipulated review and ranking system, then not only removing the reviews, but I think Amazon has a vested interest in removing the product from their platform. Farid, are you sure they are employees or just lizard men? Well, I mean, they work for Facebook, so ¿por qué no los dos? ¿Verdad? From Aditya NL, shh, it's a secret. I love it. Sorry. I'm just reading through that chain. All right. One last Facebook story, because this is the one that I really wanted to focus the most attention on. I have, I've become a zealot for better hearing health, right? But I also feel there is a huge conversation that once we got over EA and the microtransactions on a Star Wars game, that too many people backed off and acted like that was mission accomplished. The future and the soul of gaming is still at stake. The future of mobile services, mobile payments, and how we interact with data and services is still up in the air. And if we do not hold companies, game developers, game publishers, and hosting services accountable, then we will lose this fight and we will get content that is terrible. We will get terrible content. We will get predatory content, and we will lose that grasp, that handle. And then if there's a huge enough backlash, then when government does get involved in gaming and in services, in the services market, it's going to be in a way that we really don't want that to happen. So this is a story from revealnews.org, and this one was a big deal. Judge unseals trove of internal Facebook documents following our legal action. It's a terrible headline because what Reveal actually managed to expose, let me go into the article. A glimpse into the soon-to-be-released records show Facebook's own employees worried they were bamboozling children who racked up hundreds and sometimes even thousands of dollars in game charges, and the company failed to provide an effective way for unsuspecting parents to dispute the massive charges, according to internal Facebook records. So this is twofold. For all of those terrible Facebook games that actually had, predatory microtransactions built into them, Facebook was negligent in building proper safeguards, like in the way that the Google Play Store and the Apple Store can force passwords or passwords that maybe can be circumvented now that a kid can just hold the phone up to their parent's face and buy all the crystals and all the gems they need. But this is starting back in 2012. So, 7 years ago, this has been an ongoing issue with the Facebook platform. Not only building in proper safeguards to prevent kids from just being able to hit buy, but then when confronted with parents saying, our child made an unauthorized purchase with our credit card, not walking those charges back. Those two together are reprehensible. And I find it shocking and I find it galling that this is another story. This is kind of a big story. Hasn't gotten nearly as much media attention as it should have. That this is a situation where, once again, a part of the industry which should know better, which should have good safeguards, shouldn't be bilking kids out of cash, not only failed, but then when offered the opportunity to correct some of that behavior on a customer-by-customer basis, regularly chose to double down and say, nope, the charges are valid. We're not going to walk back those credit card charges. That's reprehensible. That's incomprehensible. And we deserve better. So, again, I do not want the government involved in video games. But if game publishers don't start giving parents better tools, and if hosting services like Google Play don't start giving consumers better access to information, then I feel some elected official is going to make some big headlines by taking a battering ram to the video game industry. I think it is unconscionable that Google will not let you sort apps by the type of in-app purchase that they offer. I think Google is just as complicit in the state of how terrible mobile gaming is as the developers that are building in these broken gaming mechanics to force customers to buy premium in-game currencies and to throw it away at random number generating events. Those developers would not be able to make terrible games for phones if Google didn't get a significant cut of every single purchase that happened on its platform. So Google has a financial and fiduciary interest in keeping mobile gaming in this terrible state. So, as a parent, because now I'm an authority on the industry for kids and stuff, but I felt this way even playing mobile games on my own. If I go into the Google Play Store, I think there should be a rating on any game that has a gambling mechanic. In fact, for the entire video gaming industry, if any part of your game for player progression depends on slot machine, gotcha style, loot box style, or random number generating events like a roll of the dice, then that should be equated with gambling and that game should be adults only. I don't actually have a problem with the mechanic. I have a problem with that mechanic being a significant barrier for kids to play that game in family-friendly franchises. So any Marvel game you pick up on a phone, Disney is complicit, as is Google, as is the actual game developer, in licensing the intellectual property of Star Wars and the Avengers and the Muppets and all of the Disney characters, so that when you go into the family section of the games on Google Play and you see all of the games there, how many of them are built on a microtransaction platform to encourage kids to bug their parents to get more money to fuel the game, to progress through the game so that they can play the game the way they want to play it. So few of those games in the family section are pay once, play game. Almost none of them. If the video game industry cannot police itself, like the movie industry did, we have video game ratings, but the video game ratings judge content. Is it bloody or gory? Okay, well, it's rated M for mature. But gameplay mechanics should also be factored into the game rating. If you're complicit in doing terrible things in a video game, that's currently the content of that is weighed in the rating. But if the game depends on gambling mechanics, that should also be weighted. That should also be considered. And if the video game industry cannot do what the movie industry did in properly notifying customers, consumers, to the content, not only the story content, but also the game mechanic content, then unfortunately we need some kind of government oversight, because that's the only thing we have left to leverage. Because right now it's another situation of consumer ignorance that leads parents to just dumping an iPad in front of a kid and letting them do whatever and load whatever games their friends are playing, and then wondering like, oh, well, why does Timmy need so much money to play this game? It's a video game. Games are for kids. That's not really what's reflective of today's society. And then also, just for my own personal gameplay enjoyment, I would much rather do business in a way and give my money to companies that are making games the way I want to see them made. Why I'm so happy to give a developer cash up front for a title like Monument Valley, and why I haven't picked up Marvel Future Fight in over a month, because it's just gotten to be too much of a grind with too many player stopping mechanics, and now they're just trying to extract as much wealth out of the player base that remains. So that game is pretty much dead. I'm sure the numbers still look pretty good. There are a number of people who are still playing. I really miss the Alliance. I had a team of guys on Marvel Future Fight that I really liked to play with, but every single new update has basically been paywall character. And to get the paywall character, you need to do these random number generating events. And to upgrade your character can cost all of this resource and material, and you grind for days and days and days and days to try and build that material, and then you throw it away in a slot machine, and maybe you get the upgrade, but you probably won't. So you grind and grind. But you know what? You don't have to grind, because you could just buy the upgrade character pack for $99. They actually have upgrade packs where one $99 purchase will not fully upgrade that character. So you would need to buy a couple. And this is a game with, I think now, over 200 unlockable characters. So the shortcut on that would be thousands and thousands of dollars for a pretty decent sort of team co-op mobile video game featuring all of Marvel's characters, all of the Avengers world and the X-Men, and they just recently introduced the Fantastic Four. So I like playing that. I liked past tense playing that game, but their recent changes have become excruciatingly predatory and locked in on, well, you don't want to miss out. You don't want to miss out. You don't want to miss out. You got to keep playing this game, got to keep throwing money at it. And that to me is disgusting. So, as I'm raising my daughter, we'll be having some very frank conversations between Marie and I about what types of gaming experiences do we introduce her to, because we know as soon as she's in like middle school that, whatever games her friends are playing, we're just going to have to try and deal with the blowback on that. And if there's a fad for playing terrible gotcha style games, we'll have to find some way of convincing her that that's a terrible idea. But, thankfully we have a couple years left before we have to cross that bridge. So, adding to the whole list of reasons why Facebook is terrible, this is one reason which deserves way more attention. We should really be talking about stuff like this more. And I don't like falling back on the clutching my pearls. Won't someone please think of the children? But Facebook as a company went out of their way to profit off of terrible mechanics and refuse credit card, chargebacks, all aimed at kids. Like, that's legit evil. How terrible our news cycles are right now, where that level of like outright nefariousness can fly under the radar. Like, stuff is so bad right now that this is kind of like a shrug. Yeah, we know they're bad. That's driving me crazy, blowing my mind. From Fat Produce, #Pearl Clutching. That's funny, Andrew. I'm going to have to start making that like a regular segment. This is where Juan clutches his pearls and weeps for the future of our society that he'll have to explain his daughter how things got so bad. So, I feel like that's enough talking about news stuff for right now. All right, folks, what do we want to chat about? I got a couple minutes left before we got to wrap this thing up. I definitely want to extend something that I meant to say at the top of this podcast. Happy MLK Day. Martin Luther King Jr. Sorry, not to make this Juan talks about his family life so much kind of a podcast, but I had one of those sort of bright, shiny, happy moments yesterday. One of my daughter's favorite things to do is to just go on walks, sort of exploring around the neighborhood, and then somehow we magically always end up at a coffee shop where she and I can split a croissant or a scone or something. And walking back from a coffee bean, she just started talking about Martin King Jr. And to hear a 3-year-old try to sum up the life of Dr. Martin Luther King and talking about how he was a good helper and he protected people, it's kind of brought a tear to my eye and brought a smile to my face. And however you might feel about days which memorialize people or memorialize events or memorialize demographics, I always like these days on the calendar for helping to remind us to have conversations and to join conversations and to recognize how far we've come while also understanding how far we have to go. So in observance of Dr. Martin Luther King, I hope you and your family and your friends can share a thought or can share a conversation or share a chat about what this type of a day might mean to you. So happy MLK Jr. Day. I don't know outside of that remembrance, that memorializing, what might be appropriate. It's not like I'm saying go have barbecue or something like that. But when I look at the news headlines that I have racked up for this week's podcast, there are a number of things where I feel like we could use more voices in this conversation that were good at building coalitions and building bridges as opposed to dividing us and separating us. Because I don't think any of these problems are really going to be solved until we find ways to work together. And that maybe should be the most important takeaway of a life like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s. From the Sentinel 909, you've probably seen the videos on terrifying kids videos on YouTube. Companies are brazenly evil when it comes to exploiting kids. If only there were some kind of, I don't know, agency or, division of the government that could regulate some of that content or some of that platform, From Doomer231, do you know about a device that's going to come out with a landscape slider keyboard? I really wish I did. I would love to have a sideways slider keyboard again. I mean, I was actually just tweeting with someone. There was a joke. Someone was saying like, hey, we're going to bring back the Sidekick. Call it the Sidekick 5G. I would love that. I still have my, not only my Windows phones, but also my Galaxy S1 on Sprint. It was the Epic, and I loved having a sideways slider keyboard on the Epic. Let's see. From Goran Petrovic, I just saw Hidden Figures and Green Book. Amazing, recommendable movies. Hidden Figures was a great movie. I haven't seen Green Book. It's funny, just because with the idea in the air, my wife had not gotten to see Black Klansman. And she is very sensitive. We both were raised with sort of an overly developed sense of fair play, and so depictions of racism and bigotry are very hard for us to stomach. And last night was an amazing movie. I loved Black Klansman, but it was kind of a cringe fest for my wife as she would like roll into a ball on the couch and like roll away from the TV screen and then look back and, oh, it got worse. So again, just with that kind of commentary, and the day before Martin Luther King Jr. Day was kind of a tough watch for her. Farid, what are your next coming up videos at Wombagnell and also MWC? Okay, so I am working on something which unfortunately might not be done until early February, just talking about mobile gaming. It's a segment that I take very seriously, and there's something that I just feel is lacking in the conversation when we've got incredibly powerful devices like the OnePlus 6 and OnePlus 6T, and we're starting to get hardware specifically targeting certain demographics, like the whole smartphone landscape starting to divide again, where people are willing to entertain a conversation about a specialty phone, a phone that does something very, very well, not just all-rounders that do everything kind of generally well. So I'm putting together a pair of videos, not only just talking about gaming performance, but how to really utilize mobile devices into more of a gaming lifestyle. So that's something that I'm going to be working on sort of longer term. In the shorter term, I just put out a video on an Indiegogo crowdfunded Bluetooth headset, which I think is kind of cool. I hope you guys check that out. I'm going to have a bunch of little lifestyle reviews. Like I finally got myself a standing desk, which it's hilarious. I'm not using it for my main workstation desk, but I'm using it for video production, and it's kind of rocking my socks. So I'm going to be talking about that a little bit. I have a bunch of audio stuff coming out, some new in-ear monitors. I'm going to be doing a review on some One More. I think the triple drivers are coming. The One More triple driver Bluetooth are coming, so I'm going to be doing a little listen on those. And just I know I've made jokes about it, but I am very serious in trying to continue putting pressure on the conversation about hearing health. So not just, hey, these earbuds sound great, you should buy them. Of really continuing to try and have these conversations. I'm really tired of seeing AirPods and EarPods in people's ears in situations where those are probably not good options. You see someone rocking AirPods on an airplane, that person is likely contributing to hearing damage, that they're wearing their ears out faster for using that product. And I feel companies like Google and Apple are woefully disengaged from that conversation. You know, you get to subsidize Apple's AirPods profits with your hearing health, and then you'll need to use hearing aids earlier in your life than you would have because of Apple's solution for wireless audio, and they look stupid. So those are going to be sort of sprinkled throughout the various headphone and audio reviews and smartphone reviews. For Patreon this week, I'm finally going to be taking the OnePlus out to go and do some shooting. I do have the audio review for the Huawei Mate 20, not the Mate 20 Pro, but the Mate 20, which had a built-in headphone jack. That is up on the Patreon. The audio review for the Razer is going to be up on the Patreon. And then the camera review will hopefully be out next week. And that should be a pretty good mix as we get into. Now, MWC is coming up, and I really don't know what my coverage around MWC is going to look like. I think I'm just going to keep my head down and keep focusing on the products that I actually have in-house now to review. And then when new phones come out and I have the ability to review those, maybe I'm a little late, but I'll get them when I get them. I am not going to be traveling to Barcelona this year, unfortunately. There will be a minor retooling and some shakeup happening at Newegg. So Newegg now is we're changing up a lot of how the studio operates. There were just some things that we learned towards the end of last year about how to do live content and how to engage audiences, and we got some really good we've got some really good ideas that we want to build on. So there's not going to be a Newegg now in February because I'm going to be going down to City of Industry to help them retool. But that also means I'm kind of taken out of commission for hitting another trade show in February. So unfortunately, that's just going to be sort of a redirect. I really like if we can pull off the ideas at Newegg now, I'm going to be very excited for what the future of that show is going to look like. But that means we've got to front load a lot of change and a lot of sweat equity in just rebuilding stuff. So that takes time, and that means I can't travel. So that's what I'm hoping to focus a little bit more on. And then lastly, I do still need to put together my wrap-up video on rebuilding my workstation because I'm now properly on a Threadripper 2970 with some screaming fast M.2 drives. I still have my GTX 1080 Ti. I haven't moved over to an RTX. Really haven't felt any burning need to. But that's kind of the gig right there too. So I'm hoping to have a video out on that sometime in February also. I like this, like wanting to talk a little bit more about PC building than always making everything about mobile, because dang, if some of this workstation gear isn't flippin' rad. I really like some of my improvements to workflow now that I've stepped up to a beast of a workstation processor. From Marvin C. Hey Juan, I pulled the trigger on getting the T-Mobile OnePlus 6T. I'm going to keep the View 10 but sell the Honor 8. Oh, you're selling your Honor 8. Hey Marvin, hit me up after the show. I had to give the Honor 8 back to Pocket now, and that's a phone that I maybe would want to add to my collection. So I think you still have my contact info. Drop me a line, and maybe. I'm super strapped after the holidays. I don't have a lot of operational cash right now, but maybe I could take that Honor 8 off your hands. Maybe. It could happen. From Mauricio Gutierrez, I wish I had my Nokia 1020. I am never letting go of my Nokia 1020. Sentinel 909, sliders versus dual screens versus punch hole camera. Dual screens is obviously the superior solution. No molesting of the front face screen. You use the good cameras for your selfies, and you're not constrained. You get the good cameras for video calls. Everything still works just fine. Sliders introduce more mechanical operation where the phone could fail, and punch hole is still a hole in your screen. The only correct solution is having two displays. And you save on component costs for the front face in adding the component costs for a rear smaller OLED. But obviously, the best possible solution for 2019 is to have a phone with two screens. From Fat Produce at Wombagnell, you should really try out the Steam Link app. I really do need to try out Steam Link. From Chester the Molester, the government put a tracking device in me while I was sleeping. Well, I'm sorry if you're a molester. I kind of feel like the government should put a tracking device in you. So, I mean, that sounds terrible for you, but given your current career choice, you should be observed, is what I'm saying. From Richard Ratner, hearing is an important issue. Great stuff, Juan. And one that I am definitely going to be pushing more commentary on. Daniel Ramos, what are your thoughts on the new Razer coming out? I don't like the price of $1,500. Any thoughts? What new? Oh, the Moto Razer? Yeah, so there were rumors. There are stories pointing to some patent filings. I don't know. Let me see if I can pull up a picture of that real quick. And maybe that's what we'll wrap up on. A Moto Razer. So, let me see. Is it Droid Life? Droid Life has one here. Let me go to Droid Life's article here. So, from Droid Life, this is images taken from the patent filing of having a foldable phone shaped like a Motorola Razr from back in the day. Dual screen. Why? Because dual screen is the bestest. But they're claiming a $1,500 price point. I would not buy a foldable phone. Actually, I'm not super excited about buying any foldable phone. I think you introduce too much mechanical failure. It makes the device too fragile. You have issues with where do you put batteries, etc., etc., etc. But there's something really cheeky and nostalgic about a modern day Moto Razr. So that to me is like a nostalgic piece, like could be a lot of fun. Whether or not I would really look to that as being some kind of premier smartphone computing solution, I don't know. But that would be the right time. This would be the right idea, the right form factor, the right play on our memory, our warm, fuzzy sepia toned memories. That could be kind of fun. $1,500, unfortunately, sounds about right for a high-end component device with the novelty of having a bendable screen. And the thing that's actually kind of a little bit frustrating is I don't know how many people realized how ahead of the curve Lenovo was on experimenting with foldable displays. When was it? I believe I was at one of the Lenovo conferences. What do they call it? Like Lenovo World or something like that. I want to say it was in 2016, where they had functional prototypes of bendable screen devices. Not only things that you could like wrap around your wrist, but folded in half in similar ways to what we've seen on some of these other experimental devices or the Royal foldable phone. Lenovo was working on this. And Lenovo is actually one of the right companies to focus on this. They I think, have been a leading force in pushing PC design with yogas and flip and fold displays and rotating screens and modular component devices. Lenovo actually has a lot of expertise in this area. It's just a shame that though if a folding Moto Razr comes to pass, it's going to feel like a Me Too product, right? You know, it's going to come after a bunch of companies have already released experimental designs on this. Samsung will probably get a consumer-facing foldable phone out the door first. It's just a shame because, like the lap dock, Lenovo could be making a killing on a Motorola phone which powers a proper laptop-style device. But who got the most excitement about that recently was Razer. Like this is getting kind of frustrating. I bet you'd probably be able to pull off something with an ROG phone docking into a gaming laptop style chassis before Lenovo could figure out, oh yeah, we used to do that. Motorola used to do that, and then get on with it. But it's kind of silly. As for this one, again, it's not a phone for me. This is not what I need out of a mobile device, but it could be fun. And that's also just something that has been sorely lacking. I really wish that the little Palm companion phone had gotten just a bit more traction, because it's silly. It's not necessary, but it does solve a few issues that some consumers might have in having super huge, massive, expensive phones and then wanting like a little weekender or a little companion device. It's a perfect smart pocket watch. And that's in keeping with the Palm brand, like that fits and that's funny and that's kind of novel and it's, it's cute. Those types of things, I wish we still had more of that kind of experimentation and that kind of playfulness in the tech scene, because unfortunately something like that comes out and everyone trips over themselves and rushes to, oh my God, who would buy that? Oh my God, it's like so dumb. And like, this used to be fun. Remember fun? I remember fun. From Sean H, more PC stuff would be awesome. Sharil Abdul Rahman, how RGB did you RGB your RGB workstation? So, my T80, my 1080 Ti is one of the EVGAs, so it's got some very subtle RGB accents. I do have a Corsair, the newest Corsair all-in-one loop cooler, and that has a bunch of RGB on it. And the only reason I opted for the RGB RAM, the G Skill, is because it was when I got my 64 gig kit, it was something like 78 cents cheaper than the exact same speed RAM non-RGB. And I don't know how that worked. It was one of those weird like stock and pricing and, like moving inventory, I think, kind of adjustment periods. But because it was $1 cheaper, I ended up with RGB RAM. But I think I'm just going to go with an all blue build. So it's a black case. It's a huge thermal take case. And I think I'm just going to shift it over. I like blue. So once it's all finally done and camera ready, and I've got all my cable management done, because right now my cable management is kind of a mess, I think I'm just going to shift it over to like a breathing blue build and then go from there. From Fat Produce, did you send your Xperia XZ1 Compact back to Pocket Now? I did not. So I actually worked out that review with Sony directly with their old PR. Sony's new PR never replies to me. They don't seem interested in working with me at all. But their old PR was really cool. And so they okayed me keeping... They actually sent me personally the Compact because I was interested in the Compact. The XZ1, the full-sized phone, went back to Pocket Now. And that was kind of a shame because it was one of the prettier pink phones that I think has ever come out. From Doomer231, is the bezel-less future the thing we wanted? I think we want it, but let me preface. I think consumers think they want bezel-less, but really I think it's impractical. I don't think it solves any problems. I think it introduces a number of challenges, and you still need to make bezels. So, if you have a slippery all-screen phone, the operating system needs to know how to build in dead space so that you can actually use things on the phone and elements don't go right up to the edges of the screen. And then you were probably still going to put a case on it. So you add the bezel back anyway. I think this whole argument of like, oh, it's gotta be an infinity display is silly. I think it's dumb. It's pretty and it's shiny, and it would look really cool if you put it on a little pedestal and put a glass case on it and put museum lighting on it. But we end up having to fix the problems of having an all-screen device. As soon as we get an all-screen or nearly all-screen device, we change the device so that it functions better, or it's more practical, or it survives drops better. Now I used to be the guy who would never put a case on their phones. So case in point, here's my Note 4. My Note 4 has never had a case on it. In fact, I don't even have a screen protector on it anymore. I had a screen protector on it for a while. From this last year, my BlackBerry Key 2 was the phone that had my SIM card in it for the longest amount of time. This was my favorite daily driver communications device of 2018. Never had a case on it. Never put a case on it. And again, it doesn't even have a screen protector on it. Everything else has had to have a case on it. My V40 has a case on it. My OnePlus phones have cases on them. My Razr phone. I refused to take the Razr outside, especially because we had all that rain in California, and this is already a terrifyingly slippery phone to hold. I refused to use this phone without a case on it. Everything else has had a case on it. So what's the point of trying to have beautiful design? You know, like if I take my V30, which is almost always in arm's reach, and I pop it out of its case, like, yeah, that's a pretty phone. Pretty design accents, nicely balanced design elements. I miss having the power button under the fingerprint scanner on the back of the phone. This phone is super sleek and super clean. I think it out apples Apple in a number of Apple's design language elements, but what does it matter? This doesn't matter that it's pretty, because people are only ever going to see this phone in my chunky armor case decorated with stickers from my daughter, you know? So this is what a V30 looks like. Is that pretty? No. It's practical and it's functional. And it drives me crazy that people are still pretending to entertain these conversations about, oh, well, the aesthetics and the design don't mean anything. Oh, a lot of people saying folding phones are dumb. I like those people saying folding phones are dumb. I don't see where they solve any problems, and they introduce more problems than they solve. From Sharil Abdul Rahman, eGads, is an Xperia XZ1 compact for $50 a good deal? I think so. If you like small form factor phones, I could find many worse ways to spend $50 than on an XZ1 compact. I love that little Mighty Mouse. It is a great little phone. From Paul Tech, clear case is the way to go. I guess. Still, you know, it gets all scuffed up, it gets all dirty, it gets all gross. It doesn't really show off the phone, and it starts to look really tacky as soon as it gets dirty. Sean H, like it or not, this is what peak performance looks like. This is what, you know, with all my gains, you might not like it, but this is what peak performance looks like. I don't have guns to show off. I need to start working out again. From Taivat Trevedi, I've butchered your name and I apologize. Screen real estate is a joke. Notch is a joke. Bezels were way better. I gotta say, coming back to proper forehead and chin bezels on the Razr, having functional area, not just dead space for the sake of having dead space, but, you know, these stereo speakers are not a joke. And when you use the phone for one of its intended purposes, when you hold the device and you're trying to game on it, having this little strip of dead area, equal sized, so they're symmetrical, helps so much when you're controlling the game that you're playing on the screen. There are so many games where once the controls go out to the furthest edges, like I have this problem on the OnePlus phones, where the controls are going way out to those sides of the screen so that you're not blocking the main action in the middle of the display. My thumbs don't bend this way. I have to like hold the phone out in this weird sort of fingertip balance, and I'm still pulling my thumb tips in tight. It's been refreshing going back to a more practical, if older fashioned and blockier and chunkier look. The Razr phone succeeds in what it claims it's supposed to do and does that better than all screen designs ever will. All phones look alike with the case on. It's kind of like saying everyone's when the lights are out. That's so disappointing and ridiculous. Only on iPhone you can see the Apple cutout. Phones should be reviewed with case on from now on. I mean, I've been trying to force. It's funny watching people complain in the comments. Oh my God, he's reviewing this phone. It's got a case on it. That's how people talk when they leave comments on YouTube. But I do think it's funny that you say that, because so many of the cases for the Razr phone highlight the fact that the Razr logo is RGB. So I turned it off just because battery life, and I'd rather have the 120 hertz screen on all the time. But it is funny, like, you know, you don't really see that on, like, an LG doesn't have any kind of branding on the back for you to see what that phone is. From Sharil Abdul Rahman, last question for Juan Bagnell tonight. Which phone is your all-rounder choice for 2018? I do not have a good answer for that question. So I'm going to cop out. I'm not going to answer that question. I desperately want more companies to focus on specialty phones. Spending time with a BlackBerry is an absolute joy when you're customizing shortcuts and you're punching out longer emails and you like using a phone while dedicating as little visual attention to it as possible. You get so used to so quickly, you get so used to pulling the phone out of your pocket, swiping across the fingerprint sensor in the space bar, and then hitting a keyboard shortcut to pull up something as you're starting to look at the screen. And those types of interactions are so hard to quantify properly in the review, but are subtle, life-changing interactions with mobile technology, especially if you're like me and you're getting concerned about the amount of distraction, the amount of wasted time, the amount of swiping and looking, and how so many of these services are vying for our attention. To streamline those interactions and improve the quality of every interaction, that has been an incredible commentary that I feel is lacking when people talk about phones like the BlackBerry Key 2. But that said, I want to have those kind of conversations based on what the manufacturers claim for all. Like the Note, I think, is always going to be a more interesting phone to talk about than the S, because the S is trying to be generally good at everything, while the Note is still the platform. I mean, less so in these more recent years, but it's still the platform where Samsung is trying to cram every single type of productivity hardware and software that they can into a single device. The same token, and a V series phone is still going to be a slightly more interesting conversation for me than a G series phone, because the V series phone really is trying to be a multimedia and content creation platform. And while the G phone is catching up, LG, for some reason, still puts an artificial divide between their two series of phones. I think if I were making a recommendation for someone to buy a phone and they wanted all-round performance, they wanted, good, acceptable camera performance, we could count on reasonable software updates and improvements, and especially now that they've got a carrier partnership, I would probably start pushing more of my family and friends towards the OnePlus. I have a number of family and friends on T-Mobile, so that's immediately now you've got proper support. You can walk into a T-Mobile store. I know a lot of enthusiasts get cranky about the T-Mobile add-on bloat and bootloaders, blah, 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 blah. I'm not too worried about that for my aunts and uncles that aren't super into hacking Android and flashing ROMs. But you get nearly top-tier performance in every single category. Battery life, camera performance, audio performance, et cetera, at half the price of an iPhone. That to me is a reasonable argument for a good all-rounder device. It gets tricky when you're starting to look at a Galaxy S9 now costs such and such on a BOGO deal, or you get a trade-in or something. And yeah, you can start playing with those numbers. If you had an LG G7 and a OnePlus 6T, and they were roughly the same price, I would probably lean towards the G7. But just in terms of what company is actually targeting that demographic, putting out devices at that price, and now with the backing of a major carrier, I think the OnePlus probably makes the best argument for just all-rounder, streamlined device, priced appropriately for what you get, and now with good support from a carrier. So that's about as close as I can get to answering a question like, what's the best all-rounder? Excuse me. Aw, paranoid Android golfer, just beer assistant. Just kicked me a beer. All right, folks. Let me take one more sip of water. And I think we've already run long. From Paul Tech, I'm waiting for the LG vaping pen. it might not be too far off, man. I don't know if you caught any of my vlogs from CES, but LG actually has a killer little capsule brewery kit. So you can get LG beers already. I wouldn't put an LG vape out of the realm of possibility for the near term. So, folks, thanks so much for tuning in, especially through all of my congestion and coughing into the microphone. I really appreciate it. And like I said before, I would like to reiterate, days like today, Memorial Days like today, are excellent opportunities just to think and just to ponder and to reflect, to see how far we've come, to see where we need to go. So I hope everyone is having a happy, safe. If you're in the position where you're celebrating a day like Martin Luther King Day, that you have that opportunity, or you have that luxury or that privilege to spend a little time reflecting or thinking or having conversations. And for everyone else, especially in the tech landscape, thank you so much for tuning in. I love these chats that we get to do weekly, the SGGQA podcast. There is going to be a ton of tech news coming up. And then also just on the YouTube channel, there are going to be a bunch of reviews, smaller reviews hitting soon, just talking about some fun gadgets and some fun tech. Kind of slipped through the cracks as I was trying to wrap up major smartphone coverage. And then be on the lookout. I will be making some more announcements as we get closer to detailing our plans at Newegg. Because Newegg now is going to be getting a facelift. I am very excited about what we might be able to pull off, and I'll be keeping you all posted on future shenanigans and future content and production and cool stuff like that. So thanks so much for watching. You know where you can find me around the rest of the internet, at SomeGadgetGuy on the Twitters and the Facebooks and the Instagrams. And I will catch you all next week on another installment of the Monday Morning Tech Chat Show. Again, thanks for watching. Thanks so much for the amazing live chat. You guys were so much fun to read through and have this interaction with. And be awesome. Have an awesome week with your technology. Do awesome things with your technology. And I'll catch you back here next Monday morning. Be well. Take care.